Symbolic interactionism is a very abrupt change from the functionalism conflict theory duo of early theoretical perspectives. People don't watch Monty Python anymore, but Monty Python used to have a skit where they would show something and then say, and now for something completely different. And that's what symbolic interactionism is, something very, very, very different from those theoretical perspectives that preceded it. Some of the old dead guys of symbolic interactionism, George Herbert Mead of the I and the me, socialization, development of self fame, and then Herbert Bloomer, who began this idea of social constructionism and formed the term symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism is focused on symbols, those things that we use to communicate. If something has meaning and value to us in our culture, we will name it. We will have some way of indicating that we know this thing exists so that we can talk about it with other people. We can share our ideas about it with other people. And through this communication, we can develop our views of the world. So lots of ideas in the interactionist view of society. They look at society in a dramatically different way. It is micro, small group, 15 to 25. It is the living within the structure. If the conflict theory and symbolic functionalism were describing the structures of society, the institutions, the conflicts, the inequality structures, interactionism is what is it like to actually be inside of that structure? What is your everyday life? How do you become you in a society? How do you talk to people? How do things get done, basically, on the ground in a society? And we learn how to behave and think and do and everything through interaction with people. We start out with our families, and then we move outside of our families to our friends in school, and then our peer groups, and then out and out and out as we get older and older. We construct a life for ourselves. We decide as individuals, I'm going to like this and I'm not going to like that. And it can be something as frivolous as I don't like country music. I was a big heavy metal fan in my high school years, and then still alternative rock. Don't like country music. In the big scheme of things, is that important? No. But in an interactionist view of society, it is part of the construction of my life for myself. So we kind of go through a buffet line of life and pick and choose those things that we do like, and then sometimes more dramatically pick and choose those things that we absolutely do not like. And in that social construction, we don't get do-overs. Once you make a decision, that often will make other decisions for you. We construct our lives up to a certain point, and then we can't go back to 7th grade and do things completely different. We are stuck whoever we are now, the self that we have constructed at this point. We can still make decisions and still construct and build, but we can only build with what we already have in the societies in which we live. The important quote for interactionism is that situations people perceive to be real become real in their consequences. And this allows us to discuss things like religious beliefs and political beliefs and everything without having to ever decide whether something is right or wrong. We don't have to give that moral judgment as a sociologist, because if somebody believes something, they may act upon that belief, and then as soon as they act, the belief becomes real. It may not be right. If you think about the maskers and the anti-maskers, those people who believe that masks cause illness are not going to wear them. It doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong, they are not wearing them. And by their not wearing them, they make that belief real and consequential to everybody around them. You guys might remember Irving Goffman, his dramaturgy, the idea that life is really a stage. Right now, I am playing the part of instructor, talking at my computer all by myself, while my children occasionally look at me strangely from other rooms. So we are always, always performing. whenever we occupy a status, whenever we are engaging in society, there is some level of performance to all of this. And we present ourselves to others. Are we ever ourselves? Yeah, probably with our families and close friends. We are as close to the real us as we are. But with everybody else, it's a presentation. It's a presentation of, this is what a teacher is, so let me pretend to be that today and manage people's impressions of you. Symbolic interactionists are also really big on the social construction of reality, the idea that nothing is inherently real, that even science is decided upon. And as we've watched the coronavirus take hold in the last, 6 months, 8 months, 20 years, whatever it feels like lately, it's a messy process, right? There's discussion, there's differences of opinion, there's different ideas about how the world works. And as they try to figure out what medicines work for this, what treatments work for this, how are we to find this, how do we give it to each other, all of those questions are decided upon. Yes, they may use a scientific method in order to decide upon it, but it is still decided upon. And then those decisions can change. That idea earlier on that, yeah, we don't have to wear a mask because whatever, and then a couple months later, no, really, everybody, go wear a mask. So you can see the decision process, especially in this thing over the last 6 months. Even something that's real, like a germ, interacts with society. There is still that element of social construction. What does that germ really mean to society? How are we going to interact with it? How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to form our ideas about what this thing is and how to eventually get rid of it? Symbolic interactionism also speaks to how we construct everyday, daily lives, whether like we basically spend our entire lives based on the academic calendar, right? Where August is our new year versus maybe living on the agricultural calendar where most of your work is done in the spring and in the summertime and in the fall, and then December, January, February are your quiet times. So symbolic interaction goes all the way down to that level, that daily life structure, the interactions we have with others, and how our lives are structured and how our lives have meaning. So origin of problems for interactionists. So if you remember, functionalism looks at origin of problems being a change in society. So there's social change, and then something else has to change so that you can rebalance. Conflict theory is looking at power issues. Symbolic interactionism is really different because it says it's like you learn how to do bad things. It has this whole element of socialization that the other theoretical perspectives don't have when they're looking at problems, any kind of social problems of any kind. We learn behaviors that some people decide are problems. That's it. It's a learned behavior kind of thing. We look at how people join deviant groups and learn these behaviors. They're really interested in that transition process. It's like when you talk to 4-year-olds and you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Nobody ever says they want to be a homeless heroin addict. But yet we have homeless heroin addicts. So there is something in the socialization, in the process, in the construction of their lives that led them down that path into deviance. And symbolic interactionists are going to be looking at that process. They're really big on labeling theory, not what people do necessarily, but how society defines their actions, what types of people can do what types of things. There's a lot of power involved in some ways because it's saying it's a problem when somebody says it's a problem. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does anybody hear it? If you commit a deviant act and nobody knows, then are you a deviant yet? And there's also that idea of calling something a problem so that you can benefit from it, so that you can profit from that label there. So one group can gain power over another by having the power to create the label, and then those who are labeled may accept that definition of themselves instead of in that social construction process of themselves, they will be accepting other people's labels for them instead of self-declaring their own labels. So how can you fix a problem? If you are an interactionist, you can change the labels. Some of that we do with person-first language. My oldest child has autism. I could call my child autistic, or I could call my child somebody with autism. And it kind of makes a difference, because if you call somebody autistic or diabetic or whatever, it makes it sound as though that is the bulk of their humanity. That is what they are. But if you say they are a person with autism or a person with diabetes, then that means they're an entire, complete, real, fully functioning person who happens to have this other thing. So when you're looking at the labels, that's one really big way to do it, or decide that these labels aren't a problem anymore. Yes, somebody may have a disability, but is it a big deal? Is it a problem? Is it something that society is going to view that label and say, oh my goodness, we need to do something about this? And then re-socialize. If you think about especially things like drug and alcohol rehab, if you are trying to get somebody to stop engaging in particular behaviors, you cannot send them home to the same neighborhood, same friends, same schedule, same everything, because chances are they're gonna do the same thing. You don't want them to be members in the same groups that taught them the deviant behavior in the first place. And that's an incredibly difficult and expensive thing to do, but it is important when you're looking at rehab and resocialization.